Hello, this is Odomne, and you're on the YouTube channel of the internet's most notorious ginger man, Thorin.
Right, I'm here for another episode of my new series, Rotations, which I have shamelessly stolen from Monte Cristo in Season 3. Because it's like I say, if he's not going to make use of it, I've given him enough years, as far as I'm concerned, statute of limitations has passed on that one. He's literally been in and out of League of Legends one time already in the meantime. So, you know what? I think that's in the public domain now. So it's now mine, Monty, my rotations. No one gives a fuck about your rotations and just pressing R on Sivir. There's actual people who know about the game in this. No, whatever. I'm not going to flame him too much. What I'll say is if people are starting to understand, because I notice this is where you figure out actually that people on Reddit don't actually watch any of the content. They're basically like people going onto like a TV guide forum, just commenting on all the shows, but they didn't watch any of the shows. Like, it's a very bizarre phenomenon, I've got to say. So people keep commenting like, why is there a different host on this one? Clues in the name and this bit that I said at the beginning. See, the part I'm saying now, this isn't actually just hot air. There's that part where I explained the show. So basically, I have a whole cycle of co-hosts, and then the idea is, depending on the region we're going to talk about or the topic, might be a different co-host on a different one. So as you might have seen on the last two episodes, I had Ashley Kang for the first one because it was about LCK. Then I had Amazing from Europe because we wanted to talk about some basketball stuff and obviously tie it into his European players he's known. For this one, I've got Crumbz here. Obviously, people know him for his prophetic and academy work. I don't know if that's even the way to say it, but you'll know Crumbz. Listen, used to be a pretty good jungler on Dig, to be fair. A lot of people who were the jungler on Dig. You get a good career if you're jungler on Dig, I've noticed. You either become like caster, or you become a fucking coach, or you just end up in offline TV.
To a certain point, though, the magic has really run out. So now it's like, where else are these guys going to go?
Exactly. Listen, Acadian, I think you hopped on that train too late, mate. It might still not work out for you if I'm going to guess. So we'll see if you get benched halfway through the split as usual. But anyway, good luck. I'm pulling for you anyway. I'm pulling. So, right, on this one, Crumbz actually requested a specific topic, which is right now, and I think you've actually, here's the thing, Crumbz, we planned to do this, obviously, last week we were setting it up, etc. I can't think of a better week to have picked this particular topic, because he wanted to talk about the draft and where it's at in the game right now, and obviously relate to that, the champion pools of the big teams. So we'll talk specifically about LCS here. Now, Empyre here is someone who's working with EG, right?
Yeah, working as a head analyst. I do a lot of things, mostly revolving around info gathering, scouting, prepping, work with players, the coaches, the management on like scouting targets or scouting amateur talent, opponents we're facing, itemizations, picks, basically anything revolving around league info that I can help with anyone in the organization is basically what I do.
Okay. And in the past, he's also worked with Clutch, wasn't it? Were you with them for a period?
Yeah, with Clutch
Misfits
for
as well?
2 years, Misfits. And then one split with NRG before they bombed out.
So you
maybe don't talk about that one. Yeah, maybe just leave the NRG one off the resume. The rest of it sounded really good there, mate.
To be fair, I was in the split where they made fifth, so like it wasn't that bad. I left before they made the big changes to.
Did you go over to EG from Clutch with Artemis at the same time?
Yeah, with Artemis and Andrew, who used to be the GM of Dig, and now he's the GM of EG.
Okay. So you guys just took all the life from Clutch and now just put it on EG.
I mean, some could say that Dig removed the life itself, but yeah.
Basically, what they're doing is they were like the guy who was like, give it here, let me show you how you do it. Like, they just took, they were like, listen, this is how you know they're playing it on hard mode. They were even like, you know what, give us another crack at Hooney. Send him over, but give us time this time. Let's prep him for 6 months. Once he's going to come out like Blanca in that Street Fighter movie. He's just been in a hyperbolic time chamber, just watching like rotation VODs all the game. Like, look, you just leave the wave and you come and help the team. He's like, okay. After about 6 months of that, just blasted in his eyes. He'll probably come out. It'll be like fucking Niguri or something, mate. His rotations will be god tier. No, here's the thing. So the topic is actually really pertinent right now, Crumbz. The draft element, because as much as people are complaining about the fact that we've got online games or maybe the GMs are doing a bad job in LCS, right? If people want to complain about the quality of play, because I think the quality of play is pretty bad right now, man, we're in the summer split. Like, we're getting into the meat of the summer split. Like, there's no warm-up time left, guys. People have had all this time to make their teams. They've made the changes. Now's when they should be the best games. One of the factors I think it comes down to as well, it's got to be the drafting and the meta. This is one of the few times ever I understand why the Twitter analysts put so much emphasis on draft. Sadly, they did it so many seasons in the past where they sort of cried wolf, and there were like 3 choices for some of these roles. And it was like, that's not even the worst choice. You just lost the game. But now, I'm kind of with them. I see some drafts week to week to week. Listen, we can even get an AG if you want, because I saw a very interesting one this last week where you just wonder what on earth was going through. Like, it's not that like these are bad teams. These are teams where you can think of other drafts that would make a lot more sense for them. So what are you thinking of, Crumbz, when you think of the bigger picture? What are the key issues that are annoying you or seeming weird to you at the moment we can get into?
I mean, the first one is obviously that there's champions that are unbeatable, right? So being like, oh, Varus is unbeatable, Syndra is unbeatable, all of these picks just being uncounterable, or even Aphelios, where other regions are already showing you how to beat them, right? You can beat Aphelios with, you can play we've seen Senna Wukong, we've seen Bard Ziggs, we've seen Poke. You can beat Syndra with more Poke. You can play in the top lane. There's so many champions that are being played in the LPL right now for top laners, for whether it's 1-3-1 or even just counters to tank. Like, I have the list right here of the most popular top laners for NA. Ornn, Set, Aatrox, and then all the way down you've got the new one, Jace and Wukong and Mordekai. So like, what? Like, we have Kale, Camille, Fioras. We've seen Quinn, even more Renekton. Like, there's so many champions that you can play top lane that for some reason are just vacant here, even though we're trying to play TF, and like these would be the perfect picks for going in 1-3-1. So I feel like there's a bit of a half-assing in that. We don't want to all the way commit to these kinds of picks, because if we mess up, then it's going to be brutal, or maybe the player is not good enough to pick it. So I just want to see more experimentation instead of just sticking to the same old, because when we go international and we don't have an answer to this and we have to permaban these picks because it's telegraphed in the way that the LCS season has gone, we're just going to get smoked.
What do you think, Empyre?
So there's a bit to unpack there. I do think that some picks that are like the OPs that you mentioned can be opened and you can play into them, and some teams in NA have done it. For example, FlyQuest and TL both opened Syndra versus TSM, baited them to take the Syndra, and then they counter like the Syndra comp that TSM has. But a lot of times, like Varus, I don't think anyone has opened it in LCS except for TSM versus 100 Thieves. And I think basically the reason why you don't see OPs being opened frequently, and like even in EU, like I think the only team that's opened Varus is Mad Lions, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe
they did it on purpose, in the first week, basically.
And basically the big reason is because those OPs, you need a lot of practice against them, and you need it takes specific strategies that are different from the norm. So for example, Senna Wukong, or another game that Mad Lions did, they basically picked a lot of hard engage in multiple roles, and I just think that if it takes a lot of practice time and might take away from your team's strength to put all the focus onto trying to countering this OP pick, where maybe the team will just be like, but we can just ban them, and then it's just like a normal draft. We know what to expect. It's something we're comfortable with. And it's like we don't make draft too complicated. So it's just like a choice that a team has to do. And
what is your personal opinion on that, though?
I think it depends on the players you have. So for example, Mad Lions, they have a support that can play top lane picks. Like Kaiser is an extremely proficient solo queue player.
He can play the Wukong, exactly.
Yeah. And like if you watch how he plays Wukong, he plays it better than a lot of uplaners. Like he's TP flanking, he's like waiting 2 seconds before engaging, and he flashes and he follows. It's like it really depends on the team and the players that you have. So I do think it's a possible strategy, but I don't think it's required. And you also have to remember these are best of ones. I think if we had like serious games, you'd see a lot more experimentation, but I think because of best of ones, the philosophy has to be, most of the time, unless you're like C9 and you're like winning every game, and then you have kind of like a buffer to like lose some games and you can start experimenting, like they did last split. Towards the end, they were playing more Syndra, Yasuo, etc. But when you're really trying to rack up those wins to get a good seeding for playoffs, or trying to make playoffs, then it's all about getting the best draft, the best comfort for that best of one to win. And that's just the unfortunate situation, I think.
Doesn't there come a point though when you have these champions that have 100 or 90+% pick and ban rate where you don't even have that much practice with it? Like, just the teams that get to play are no longer going to have as many Syndra or Varus games as they'd hoped to have, because it's getting permabanned all the time. Not only do people not want to scrim against it, they don't want to play LCS against it. So that should give more confidence to somebody to say, maybe we can play against it. If you can do an internal practice with your own academy team, you should feel confident. Okay, if we can beat our academy team here, it's not like if we open Varus, this team's going to have an entire week's worth of Varus scrims.
I agree there, but I think you can only do that versus like mid-table or lower table teams, because even if Sven hasn't played Varus for 3 weeks, if he gets Varus, he's going to be a monster on that champion. Similarly, like Perks, they gave him Varus and he 1v9'd on that game. Mad Lions' first game of the split, they gave it to Perks and he 1v9'd, and they're like, oh, well, he knows how to play Varus, even maybe if it's banned like 95% of the time in scrims. He's that good of a player that he can abuse a broken champion like that. But then you can do it versus some of the weaker players that, because like Varus isn't, it needs, you need to be really proficient at the champion to really maximize his kit, similar to also Kalista. So I think that's why, like, for example, TSM this past weekend opened Varus versus Delboth, because when you think of Cody-san, they opened it versus Cody-san. Because when you think of Cody-san, he's not really a Varus player. You more think of him like the scaling ADC,
Of course, yes.
who plays
Hyper carry,
like Sivir, Xayah, Kai'Sa, Caitlyn. So they're just like, okay, if you give him Varus, and then we create, and then Doublelift also gets his Kalista, and they have like a lot of engage. They put Cody-san on something that he's not really comfortable with, not his archetypical ADC, and then you can take that risk. And especially since you're on red side, you can weigh that risk and be like, yeah, it's fine. It's versus Cody-san. We can open Varus.
So how come you guys?
There's a lot of decision making.
Do you guys feel that about Syndra? Because you've banned Syndra every single game, not let anyone have it.
I think Syndra can complicate the similar to Varus. You can complicate the draft because she's a flex pick, and it's also something that's like banned a lot in scrims. We also have a lot of good Syndra players in the LCS in terms of mid lane. So sometimes it's just like, it's the same decision. It's like we don't get a lot of practice versus, because like sometimes blue side also bans it. So at the end of the scrim week for like, yeah, we opened Syndra, but we only got to play it maybe like against it 4 times, and that team didn't flex it. This team can flex it. It's better to sometimes, like, I think other teams also go through this process. It's better to just ban Syndra because they have a Syndra player, or they can also flex it, and we haven't faced a Syndra player this week that's as good as this Syndra player. So sometimes like these OPs or like these OP flex picks, when you open them, it can complicate draft, and then if you lose the game, you're like, we should have banned it. Of course we should have banned it. It's Bjergsen Syndra. It's Sven can play Syndra. Of course they're gonna flex at bottom. So sometimes it's just taking away that headache or like that excuse that could happen if you lose that game.
One thing to say about this though is, one thing I liked there is where you addressed like a scenario, like for example, if you're against Cody-san, actually the reason it makes sense to open Varus there is, if anything, you want him to pick it, like just make yourself less effective, mate. And if you haven't been prepping to use that champion, just fuck your whole comp up. Go ahead. You're basically just saying to them, would you like to just like sabotage your own comp, but all for like the naive desire of like getting your hand caught in the cookie jar, thinking you're getting an OP pick. Like that's one of the reasons I don't get personally why some of these are like permaban just for everyone across the board. Because coming from the world of Counter-Strike, where our pick ban is just the maps, you wouldn't believe how many times a team for real who's a top team uses the logic, I'm going to ban this map against this team because I always ban it and I never ever want to play it. And I'll say to them, yeah, but the team you're playing like is bad on the map, so they're not going to pick it. And if they do, hell, that might be good for you, mate. That's instead of something strong they would pick themselves. Like you win either way. Either you get an extra pick in this scenario, or you can ban something else, or you basically say to them, do you want to just take a weird gamble where you're going to play something you don't even like? And listen, even though I don't have comfort against it, you're not going to have comfort executing it. And especially some of these champions we're talking right now, these aren't 1v9 champions on their own. You have to build around it. You have to have teams who know what to do around the champion. Like As much as Varus looks OP when they win all the games now, that's because it's the players who know how to play Varus. I bet you could make some really bad comps that people would just be in nightmare world. They'd be on the outside of the team fight, never doing anything.
Yeah, I mean, like, TSM also almost lost that game, right? And
yes.
Varus, while he
did their best to, at least.
He did have a rough early game, but his ultimate and his poke in the mid-late game was becoming a bit of a problem for TSM. So it is still a risk, even if you give it to like a weaker carry ADC that isn't really known for playing picks like Varus or Kalista. These picks can still like be a hindrance to you in the game if you don't play really, really properly.
What do you think, though, Crumbz? Because obviously he made a good counterpoint there that, like, listen, I like your approach, which is, listen, what we have to consider here is if I'm a top team in NA, listen, I'll worry about winning LCS when it's playoffs, but right now I also have to think to myself, what if there was a Worlds? Like, I don't want to be going to Worlds like every NA team did for so many years and be like, week 1 of Worlds, let's all just have okay games and then switch the whole meta and fuck week 2 like they used to every time. So his basic counter is, right now, it's a best of 1, so people only care about winning the best of 1, basically. They're not trying to sort of attain to a higher ideal in a sense.
I mean, I think that there's a lot of merit in that, right? The best of 1 does tend to not only give you, you can have the argument of you don't want to experiment that much, you want to play it safe, just play your strongest, make sure the enemy is not on the strongest. But the thing that catches me off guard is that it doesn't feel like a lot of teams are just winning drafts because, we just got a lot of OPs. We got the most broken comp. It feels more like, somebody else just drafted something that is shit, or it just put themselves not in a position to really win the game with this, because as long as the other team just holds on for the first 20 minutes, they won. And like, there's really nothing the enemy can do. So that is the thing that catches me off guard, is that no one's walking away with like, oh boy, you just smurfed the draft completely. It's like, okay,
well, what about this?
Turn it down.
I would say I've also heard similar comments. I would retranslate it like this for the layman fan, right? Even though you're hearing analysts say that so many picks are possible, and then that there are so many strong picks, it seems to me like there's so much room for error to fuck your whole comp up if you like pick the wrong thing in the first 3 picks. Basically, now, like if you start down a path and you think, I've got to grab this, it's available, you can then just at the end have a comp that doesn't work. Like some of these niddly comps I've seen work. Like some of these, like at the end you just think, I know you think you got the right champions, but you didn't get them in the right, like they're not the right collection of them, if that makes sense. What do you think, Harry?
Oh, it's not even just that. Like if you watch the caveat with LPL and using LPL as a comparison is that their players are insanely good mechanically. Like you're not going to be able to replicate Jackie Loves Ezreal. Like they're first picking Ezreal like pretty much every game that it's open, and he could just completely carry a game. You don't have anybody else that can do that. Karsta's Lee Sin. He's playing really well right now. You don't have anybody in NA that can pull that kind of game off. So the teams are saying, oh, yeah, we could do this. Like, sure, like these teams are playing. It's like, well, not only is your Lee not as good, but your team does not play that well or with Lee Sin in the first place. They want to farm back and scale. So the picks also depend on the entire team knowing how to work around them. And that is another element that is missing because you just don't have enough. Like the skill cap is not high enough for you to actually bust out all these very difficult compositions, but there are champions that you can play that make it a lot easier for you to just not have to rely on that skill. I like seeing the Ivern from Mad Lions, not in Immortals, but it's like, okay, I'm just gonna sack a matchup and be useful in another way.
So there are 2 things that were mentioned there. The first is picking a champion that maybe a team strength doesn't utilize. So if we look at NA traditionally and still prevalent today, we're more about team fighting, scaling, ARAMing, right? Except for C9 who can play multiple styles, and I think you could also say that about us at Evil Geniuses. We like to play split push stuff like Rise, TF that we've done.
Zuke basically can side lane, of course.
Yeah,
yes.
Not Karma though. Please don't ever give us Karma.
We'll get to that.
So picks like Nidalee has seen a lot less success. I think, as far as I know, 0 wins out of like 6 games or something so far. So it makes sense, right? Like Nidalee is a pick that requires you, one, to have an extremely talented jungler. C9 could pull it off. They haven't shown it yet, but C9 could probably pull it off. And you have to play for the jungler, so you need strong lanes. 2 or probably 3 strong lanes, and then you also need to have really good coordination, because what Nidalee wants to do is she wants to counter jungle and she also wants to take objectives. Not a lot of teams in NA know how to work with the jungler to hurt the enemy jungler and to play around stacking objectives very well. Outside of like C9, I would say maybe us and maybe FlyQuest. So that's why these picks that are working in other regions aren't working in NA. In this case, the Nidalee. And then the other thing that you mentioned is like picking something on 1, 2, 3 and then not building correctly around it. One thing that popped into my mind from this past weekend wasn't LCS, but it was in LEC, is that G2 picked Kalista and then a support, I forgot which support, and then aggressive jungler in Rek'Sai.
Was it Nautilus?
Yeah, I think it was a Nautilus. And so,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
What does a Kalista want to do? She wants to pressure dives, she wants to sack dragons. Okay, so then on the 4-5, you want to pick something that complements this theme basically. But what does G2 do? They pick a Kali and they pick Kassadin for the mid lane. And Kassadin is the antithesis of like trying to help the jungler, trying to pressure sides in the early game. He wants to farm, he wants to scale. You can't really do much to help your team until like level 9, level 11. And so what happened is the enemy team ended up taking the early dragons because they didn't have mid priority. And then the Kalista was in an even lane because the enemy team could bring their mid laner whenever if they tried to pressure dives. So that's like an example of like you're picking something on 1, 2, 3. The job isn't done there. You can't just pick for lane on the 4-5. Usually soul lanes are picked on the 4-5 sometimes, usually. And so you don't just pick for lane. Like probably what happened was like the Kassadin was just to counter, like be like a scaling counter. But it didn't take into mind that your 4-5 needs to thematically synergize with your 1, 2, 3 pick. And when there's anti-synergy there, that's where most drafts I feel like fail. Is that the comps that are being created aren't coherent together, and or they are not effective in countering or being defensive against the enemy's composition.
G2 actually has a history of weird comps like that as well. Like that's how they've ended up. If you notice, it's nearly always mid lane. It's usually Caps who does it. Is they sometimes just like it's like I remember the one I can't remember all the details of it. Maybe one of you can. It was against SK Telecom at MSI last year, and it was something like, 'cause you could even hear the comms that like I think I'm going to get this wrong probably, but I think it was like they gave a Zay to Faker or something, and at the time it was maybe like game 3 or game 4, and at the time right it was like Caps told them like, oh, you can give it to him, it doesn't matter, and then afterwards they gave it, and then they were like, right, what do you want to play instead? And he was sort of like, shit, because like he basically hadn't thought that far ahead. He thought like we can deal with it, but like he hadn't actually thought, what am I going to pick? So that's why every now and then you'll see in some of G2's games they'll just end up with the wackiest mid pick ever, and the fact that they ever win any of those games is like, listen, that's what happens when you have 5 genius players, isn't it? It's nothing to do with you didn't plan around that, surely. So you could tell that eventually that's going to come back and bite you. That's sort of a track record.
Yeah, that's what's happening now, right?
Makes sense. Yeah, I've got a question for you. I'll see if I can find it myself while I'm looking. But here's the thing. Something we can ask Empyre about is that thing that you referenced earlier, Crumbz, which is like top lane, for example. There's all these counters that they have over in LPL. Like, as you even pointed out, like famously, the Shy plays Quinn. So if you ever play against him, you have to just hope he doesn't just pull that out for no reason, because no one's fucking banning. Yeah, no one's. No, but I mean, no one's banning Quinn, are they? So at any point in time, you can just pull that on your ass, and if he pulls it, he pulls it. Like, it's just a little trap card he's got. But here's the thing. I understand, though, why they don't play some of the champions you were talking about. Like, I understand why they're not going to play Fiora in NA. Like, why would I? Or Camille. That can be hard. You have to have skills.
Okay.
I might just say, and this is where Empyre can jump in, I might just say play Volibear. It's safe.
I will add
just
one
thing
before Empyre jumps in about the Camille and Fiora. D1 to challenge your Soliko, almost exclusively top lane, is about these split pushing champions. Okay. It is Fiora, Camille, Jax, Irelia. It is not tanks top. It is like hardcore split pushers.
But it's just not getting into LCS.
Exactly. Like it's not the pros really that are playing it so much. It's like just the people that are there are
the
playing
one tricks or whatever.
Yeah. So like why is it not translating?
Right, okay.
I mean, like champions like Camille, Fiora, Quinn, I won't put Kayle in the same group as them, because I think Kayle has more team fighting potential versus certain compositions, especially with her ultimate and how her E splash damage can work in the late game. But the split pushing champions, I think, Thorin, I was watching Summoning Insight earlier, and I think Justice was talking about how the game right now isn't completely around split pushing and taking towers. It's more about like pushing side lanes and then grouping around objectives, because these objectives pop up every 5 minutes or 6 minutes, and you need to contest for them most of the time.
Sure.
You need to contest for them. On top of that, what you mentioned, Thorin, was like the skill. You need to play these champions in a very specific way. You also need to put in time to practice something that maybe an NA team is usually focused around team fighting and scaling. So now you have to like divert a lot of practice and attention and resources into learning this new type of game where you're only looking towards playing around split push and maybe avoiding getting dragons. Or like maybe taking the first 2 dragons, because say you have like an early game comp around bot side, and then that gives you a buffer that it's going to take the enemy team a long time to get their soul if they want to get the like 4 dragons. And we kind of saw that in the Golden Guardians FlyQuest game, where they got the first 2 dragons, and then they couldn't really contest after that because they had like a split push Jace TF versus FlyQuest like scaling or an Orianna comp. So they just gave them the like 1, 2, and I think 3rd dragon, and then they just end up getting towers and inhibitor on the top side. But yeah, like generally, I think split pushing right now isn't the best way to play the game, unless maybe because like TF is super popular right now. TF really enhances split pushing because of his ultimate. But if you don't have TF in your comp, split pushing is really difficult because a lot of champions can hold versus these split pushers, and then there are also these objectives that pop up where a split pushing champion is going to be a lot less effective than, like a Fiora is going to be a lot less effective than an Ornn when it comes to these Dragon 5v5s. So I think, yeah, generally there's a consensus that split pushers aren't always an optimal pick. It takes like a very niche situation to occur for you to pick a split pushing champion, especially when you don't have the TF.
By the way, Crumbz, I think I found the game. I got the details wrong. I think it was when they gave Faker Silas, and then Caps himself had to pick a Zero, and then just like shit the bed the whole game, and they just got rocked in that match. Like, so I think that was the scenario where at the time, like Silas could be super strong, obviously, if you were the right type of team. So anyway, what do you think about what Empyre was saying there? Because obviously, I mean, like the meta of the game is different in terms of.
I completely agree that a lot of it is just enabled by TF. Like, I don't want to see split pushing strategies that aren't really involving TF, but he's getting a big pass so far. He hasn't really started to get banned, despite other regions almost having to ban it on red side in the first 3 picks just to make sure it doesn't get first pick because it's so strong in lane. That is why I want to see the split push. If you're running TF, why not commit to like Camille TF? Top laner is over. There is no way your top laner can play.
So there are better champions right now that work with TF because Camille, maybe not Fiora, but like Camille or like say Kayle take a bit more like champions like Volibear. So the champions you're seeing in the West paired with TF are like the Volibear, Wukong, Renekton. They can pressure the dives really early, and they also have really strong engage. For example, like Volibear can disable a tower, so it's like an even stronger dive. They're also like a bit bruisery, so they're a bit more tankier as well. I just think because those bruisery champions are a lot more, they can punish more in lane. I think that's why, and like they also have an element of team fighting. So if you do want a team fight, there's also an option there. But I do think like Camille, you can pair Camille with TF as well. But I think it's just because like Wukong, Volibear, they're like season 10 champions. They have overloaded kits.
Sure, but there's only one Wukong game in LCS. Right? There's no way you can say Wukong's getting played there. It's got 1 ban and 1 pick. No one's playing it except Licorice yesterday. So Volibear just started seeing play last week. It had 2 games on it, and it was only this week we're starting.
Does Jace not fit in there?
Kind of like Jace with split push, but the one that I remember the most that I really liked the Camille with was into the Jace, where you know you're gonna lose lane if you're picking one of these tanks early. So just pick Camille TF, hit 6, it's over for the Jace. Or it was, I think there was another one against Mordekaiser, a similar idea. My thing is that I get to perception that it's just that the top laners are not confident in these picks just yet. But I see even in Academy, you've got Fudge from Cloud9 playing the Camille, pulling it off. You've got a lot more variety that is happening from the top lane, and it doesn't seem to be hurting the overall flow of the team because maybe they know how to play it better.
When I looked up the other regions, relative to NA, no one is playing Volibear as much.
We picked it 3 times, I think. But a lot of teams are playing it in jungle right now in NA, which is
That's true.
Weird.
Yeah.
Licorice played it once top lane, and I think there were a couple of... Oh, Ruin also played it twice in top lane, and Hanser once in top lane. I think it's picked, but it's... I don't know, for some reason this week, LCS was playing it more in jungle, and also Academy. I don't really like it in the jungle. I kind of view him... He's more of like an Udyr in the jungle, but with a useful ultimate. He kind of gets outskilled pretty fast, whereas like in top lane, you can abuse his laning a lot more, like because his laning is so strong. He also gets really easy push. He also can disable the tower for dives. I like him a lot more in the top lane than jungle.
Hey, man, Mike, there's someone chopping grass. So I'm just,
alright. So I had the same experience when I was in LA, mate, which is that every single time you want to do a podcast, so it's usually going to be in the morning, like around lunchtime, there's always a guy doing that. And they always take like 30 minutes to do one fucking like 2 meter square piece of grass. Like, are you cutting this? Like, what is that? Like, does it only have one tiny blade on it or something? What is it?
Yeah.
We don't even have a grass patch. I don't know what he's doing.
Yeah, but I also like in terms of like, I think there is a place for Camille for sure. It's just, sometimes the argument is just like, why take Camille when like you can there's just different options. You can take Camille, you can take Kayle, Jace, Volibear, Wukong, Renekton. There's just a lot of options, and it just depends on what you practice this week, on that week of scrims, the champion pool of the top laner. But I think they can all work. It just depends on quite a few circumstances.
Like if I was a top laner, I would be playing. I'd be like, okay, sure, I'll play all your tanks, but I would be practicing Camille matchups all year long, from start to finish, just to make sure that when time was right, like, okay, I can bust out the Camille, I can surprise one of these players that has no idea how to play into this, and just completely obliterate the lane. Because a big part of the split pushers' power is that no one really is lane against them. No one really plays against them. So they're not really sure how the matchup is going to go. They're just going to play it like a normal tank matchup. And that usually ends up with you getting bopped.
Yeah, unless it's versus Ornn, who can like kill everything once he gets his items.
Yeah, Ornn is the assassin tank.
Right, where do we go to next then? Like, what do you think of the jungle pool at the moment, actually, Empyre? Seems like, because I have to say, if you look at a lot of the regions, junglers feel like the people are getting flamed a lot as well. Like, there's not a lot of junglers that look good at the moment.
I think that's... I guess my theory would be that it's outside of like Trundle and maybe Lee Sin, it's more of a farming jungle meta. And so if your team is not good at enabling your jungler, because those farming champions require like full clears, and require like getting a lot, like if you can, getting both Scuttle Crabs, counter jungling, stacking objectives. So like if someone picks Graves and you lose priority in like mid lane, so you lose one Scuttle, and your bot lane doesn't have priority, so you lose like the first dragon, then the Graves becomes a lot less useful, or an Italy becomes a lot less useful, or an Olaf becomes a lot less useful, because that's their objective. Their objective is to pressure the map rather than pressure lanes, and in order to do that, you need your laners to facilitate you. So maybe that's why we're seeing people criticize junglers.
So the lanes aren't good enough, aren't playing well enough for the junglers. That's a classic.
I mean, in the meta like this, outside of like Trundle and Lee Sin, like if you pick Nidalee and your mid lane and bot lane loses prio, like what do you do as Nidalee? You can't really gank them. You're a Nidalee.
Yeah. No, it's true. Like you need winning lanes. And like, where do you stand with Lee Sin in particular, though? Because every time I've seen the Lees that are good, they do one thing only, which is kick flash someone. Like that is the only thing that they have that keeps the champion useful, whether it's a pick in the jungle before a team fight, or even during.
It's a pretty good single trick to have, though. It is pretty fucking good.
It is super hype. Like, that is the only way that Lee gets by. Like, if he can't do that, he's not doing anything.
I mean, Lee Sin is the like the ultimate 2v2 mid jungle champion.
Right. Yes.
Because and like you see him historically paired with champions like Syndra or LeBlanc, who can set up his ganks, and then they just have so much mixed AP and AD damage that they can really use their pressure either to gank mid or to like get prio and then like move into the jungle or move into bot lane for like a dive. So I like Lee Sin, but it's only good if a team has good mid jungle synergy. So for example, C9 or like in other regions like Karsa. The Lee Sin player also has to be really good mechanically on him.
Shadow, sure.
Shadow.
People,
we played it a lot in spring, playing like Lee Sin LeBlanc. So you really need it really requires like good 2v2 mid jungle, and also the mid laner and the jungler need to know how to punish the enemy mid laner if they like misstep. You can also try like set up dives in mid lane, because like usually you want to pair Lee Sin with like I said, Syndra, LeBlanc, or maybe even TF, and it's just so easy to pressure the enemy mid or get prio easily and then pressure other lanes with that mid jungle combo, because they're just so strong in the early game. Sure. But a lot of teams don't have good mid jungle, especially in NA. And that's why they go to scaling compositions, because the mid jungle don't know how to play together, or maybe the mid laner isn't strong laning, or maybe the jungler isn't good mechanically. Like we have a lot of like kind of older junglers.
Boomer hands.
Yeah, like they've become more boomers now, like Xmithy and Medios.
Yeah, sure.
And
even
so,
Svenskeren to some degree. He's certainly not the monster he used to be, mate.
Yeah, I mean, like Svenskeren isn't all the way there.
Let me see his Lee Sin. Let's start rocking that out, shall we? Should we have a little test on this one, Sven? Come on, mate. Pull it out. He used to be the monster on that champion. He used to be one of the best. Now he'd rather play Trundle and just chill,
I mean, he pulled that Lee Sin a lot in spring. We had like a good win rate with Lee Sin in spring.
All right.
But
I want to see that blabber shit where you go top lane and kick the guy into your own player and get him killed. Like, do you see that one where he kicked it to Liquid? He was like, "This is sick. I'm making plays." And Liquid was like, "You're supposed to kick him away from me." And that's not actually. Give me a break. Now, by the way, isn't that somewhat telling about the state of Italy? That like the most obvious team to play would be C9, and they just don't even bother, because I assume they just think, why even bother putting the execution burden on ourselves? Just keep playing what we're playing now.
They'd rather have Olaf. Because like Olaf is, he's kind of like stronger early game, like in terms of skirmishing, and also Nidalee, something that people don't account for is she's harder to draft around because she's AP. So you need to kind of like take into account that you don't have a lot of magic damage in other areas, or like it can also like hurt your mid laner, because something that people don't account for is that mid laners don't like when another role is AP as well, of course, because they're going to do less damage because the enemy team's going to itemize more MR. So yeah, that's like another reason why you don't see a lot of AP junglers.
It's a good point. Yeah.
Beyond the jungle though, what about roles like support, where you've got Bard, you've got the Senna compositions, you've got a lot more. I think there's still a lot of variety that you can pull out in the bottom lane.
Also, don't at the moment, most of the supports basically also define the comp that you pick. Like as a result, like in theory, like versatility, there's a big deal.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like right now, it's like what LS, I don't know if he like has wanted, which is he wanted like more variety, more ranged champions in the bot lane, and we're seeing that now. There's a lot of Bard, Karma, Senna, Lulu. Some Soraka, but not much. Some Zillion. But yeah, I think now with the nerfs that happened to like Nautilus and Leona, and only Thresh really threatening those ranged champions, you can easily ban Thresh, and that's what LEC does a lot. They ban Thresh, and then you can really pick a lot of champions in bot lane that fit the comp. If you need a lot of.
Do you personally like where it's at, Empyre? Do you like where the support pool's at?
Yeah, I really like it, and I also, I'm also like not that afraid of like Yuumi. I don't think Yuumi's OP. Only us and C9 are willing to open Yuumi, because like we know kind of how to play into it, and we know how to play like range champions into it. So Lulu is usually picked versus it in other regions, and I think like NA is kind of like at the start of like the preseason in scrims, you can see all kinds of range champions outside of Bard. You know, like Lulu, Karma, people playing Janna, Soraka, Morgana, and then once like week 1 happened, and they're like, these like range champions, they take like a lot of effort and whatnot, and now teams are going a bit like are kind of shying away from them and going back to like tanks, except for like Bard. But like Bard right now is basically a tank because he builds Deadman, so so he's kind of like a bit of an outlier. But yeah, I don't know. I wish teams would experiment more with like when Thresh is out of the game, you can experiment more with playing ranged champions.
I'm hearing that a lot of the limitations that come from drafting are just lack of effort.
I mean, I don't know if it's like.
Sounds more like they want to focus their attention elsewhere. Isn't that the way you'd say it, Empyre?
I would say like it's just easier to not go that route sometimes, and sometimes that's because of like player limitations, and sometimes that's because it might take a lot of resources to like go that specific route.
You know, another champion that I always see picked in LCS that in some of the Asian regions is barely used is Brom is still picked all the time in LCS. What's the deal with that? We're just never going to get rid of this addiction. Like the last few years, it's gone too far, boys.
I don't know, like especially in the like we were not seeing Brom almost at all in scrims, and then the last 2 weeks been popping up.
Is that considered just like a brain dead champion or something for stage play? 'Cause it gets played a lot, doesn't it?
Wow.
I think like I
have the stats here just to give you a quick little thing on it. LCS has Brom played. Well, he's got nine games of presence. He's won 4 games, lost 3. Now, this is a region with 10 teams and best of ones. LPL with 17 teams and
they play best of 3
has less games on Brom.
There you go. And they're the most experimental region.
They have 2 games of Brom.
Yeah, I mean,
it's
like
a bad luck.
Brom is a brain dead champion, basically, and he's not really picked for lane, right? He's picked to like give peel to your ADC, and he can also like counter specific champions compositionally. Like for example, if enemy team like picks an ADC jungler like Kindred or Graves, Brom can like minimize what they can do in skirmishes. But if like an enemy if someone blinds Brom, you should be able to punish it really easily with the champions that exist right now in the meta. And like for example, we did that to TSM. We picked Bard and we really hard punished them in the 2v2. We can really capitalize on it, unfortunately, but I don't think you can blind Brom. And like it's really dangerous to blind Brom. I think you can sometimes counter it, counterpick with Brom if you think the enemy bot lane isn't going to pressure you. And we did do that. I think week 2 where we picked Brom into Thresh, I think, and that's kind of
Aphelios Brom into Ezreal Thresh.
It feels like Aphelios is the one that's pretty much always paired with an NA.
Yeah, because like Aphelios really excels with having peel, either through like a tank support peeler like Tom Kench or Brom, or like a Lulu. And we basically picked it because we didn't think they could. They had an Ezreal, and Ezreal Thresh doesn't really punish that hard. It's not like a hard punish combo, so we thought we could just get away with the Brom pick there, and it was like it fit our composition. But yeah, I think you can almost never blind Brom, especially versus good teams. If you try to do that versus really good teams, you're gonna get punished really hard.
What do you think about the Ziggs Bard combo in the bot lane?
I really love Ziggs. I've always loved Ziggs, especially since back in Clutch 2018 we had Apollo, and he's always been a big Ziggs player. I think I love pairing Ziggs with GP as well. You just have so much global control of the map, and I think it's playable. I also think it's really playable into Aphelios. because Aphelios is weak into magic damage, and he gets poked out pretty easily. So I think if the enemy team is weak into poke, you can always pick Ziggs bot lane. And as long as you craft the rest of the composition with Ziggs, you have a lot of control around the map. Because if Ziggs gets ahead, you can't do much against his clear, his poke. He takes down towers really fast. He has kind of like global reach with his ultimate. It can be really annoying to play against a good Ziggs bot lane. But then again, it's like the same question as before. Is like, is that ADC going to be comfortable playing around Ziggs? We know like a lot of ADCs in NA aren't really comfortable playing mages. And so, yeah, it's really hard. Like, people will just say, why play Ziggs when we can just play Aphelios or Ezreal and we scale, and then it's like a lot more consistent results. But then you have teams like, I think the team that played Ziggs bot recently was 100 Thieves Academy, and I saw Papa Smithy tweet, glad we finally got to pull out the Ziggs out. So it seems like they were working on it for a while. And they put a lot of time into it because they thought at some point it's going to look really good on stage, and then they pulled it out. And sometimes that happens, like where you have this pick that you don't force it into on stage, but you practice it in scrims, and at some point it's going to be perfect, and you pull it out. And in that case, it's like if your player is really confident in this pocket pick, then you can spend a lot of time practicing it. One situation that we had last year on Clutch with Cody-san is he's really confident on Kog'Maw, and we practiced a lot of like Kog'Maw into Kai'Sa and scrims, but no one really blinded Kai'Sa on stage. And then there was this one moment in the Gauntlet finals, Game 5, who was there? Sven blinded Kai'Sa, and we're like, wow, we get to play Kog'Maw finally in the Game 5 of the Gauntlet, and then we won that game. So like I do think like these pocket picks that are kind of fringe, if your player is really confident in playing them and you have that sort of player that likes this pocket pick, practice it a lot in scrims and then don't force it on stage. At some point the situation is going to pop up and then you can pick it then.
That's music to my ears.
Yeah, I think basically like the biggest thing with like draft is as long as like the biggest problem that coaches have with draft is like creating a coherent theme within all 5 picks, and as long as you focus on that and you don't just look at things in isolation, like okay, they picked this solo laner on 2, let's just pick this direct counter. Okay, what if the hardest counter is maybe like Echo into Syndra, but Echo is bad into the rest of the comp? Maybe what
so
they
comp beats matchups right now.
Yeah, I think so. Like if it's if like the skill level isn't a huge difference, like you sometimes see with like G2 versus a lot of weaker teams,
Sure.
then I think comp is a lot more important. Like for example, what was the team? I think it was Fnatic in playoffs or at some point in spring. They were picking engage tanks in top lane in kind of hard lane matchups. Like they picked Malphite into Aatrox, and that's kind of a hard lane for Malphite to play. But they picked Malphite because the enemy team had Aphelios with no peel, so the Malphite would just ult the ADC. And actually, we saw that 2 days ago with IMT. They picked Malphite into Mordekaiser, and the lane was super hard. But all the Malphite had to do, you're muted.
He took wrong runes though.
Yeah, I know. But in the end, like, I mean, who knows how? Like, they could have punished the Malphite more for sure, and probably Malphite there wasn't great. Like, Fnatic did it more smartly, where they picked Malphite into an AD.
You can see
champion.
the idea behind it, though. Yeah.
Yeah, like if you like, Malphite still has some hard lanes versus some AD champions like the Aatrox, but if you get out there, you know, maybe 0-1-0 or 0-0-0, and only down like 20 CS, what is Aphelios going to do versus a Malphite that just ults you in team fights?
I'm gonna watch that. I'm gonna rewatch that match or just look for it real quick, because if I'm not mistaken, Malphite actually solo killed Aatrox early
Maybe.
on. Like he had a solo, and because he was running PTA Malphite, but this is the kind of thing that I'm saying, that these fringe picks, they're not only new for the team playing them, but for the team against it.
Yeah, and like I think tanks are generally really underappreciated. Like we've played Poppy into Aatrox in spring, and Poppy can go down like 15, 20 CS, but then at some point she's gonna pressure the Aatrox can't do anything once she gets Sunfire and Tabbies, and then in team fights, if they have like a Kalista, what is Kalista gonna do against a Poppy when she presses W and the Kalista can't move anymore? So that's why I think it's a lot smart to think about. Like we could have picked something that pressures Aatrox in lane, but we didn't. We picked something that is going to hurt their team comp rather than slightly hurt Aatrox in lane.
And as you say, like it's not like you're just going to like completely lose the whole lane and have like get solo. No, you're just talking about you're down in a bit of CS. But what you get in the team fights, where like in this scenario, you neutralize their carry.
Yeah.
It's totally worth. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
And the other team, I think even like what Crumbz is saying there, if anything, it's going to trick the other top laner to think, I don't have to go absolutely ham on this match. I'm just going to win it easy. It's like, yeah, you're going to win the matchup there, but you should have actually tried to destroy that pick because of what it's going to do in the team fight.
Yeah, another example is like, you could pick Echo into Syndra, but what will Echo do versus like a Brom, a Philios? Like, how is Echo going to approach a team fight versus like a Syndra, Brom, Trundle, a Philios in the mid late game? Whereas if you have Azir, you're going to outrange them and you can poke them, because like all those champions are susceptible to poke and susceptible to like DPS AP damage. So I think these are situations that coaches and players should like look for, where I could pick this and maybe win lane harder, but if I pick this champion, their team can't play against my champion in the mid game.
I've got a question to ask you on these lines then, because the first thing I think of is, it's all well and good us being in like the LS simulator here where we're doing the draft and we're trying to figure out the comps, but I'll tell you one area, it always comes up in discussions. It's like what Paul Belter said to me today on Somebody Insight, like, oh, but maybe the player asked for that thing. That's half the problem, is the coach is trying to design this comp, but then there's players, in this case some of the G2 players, it seems plausible, do this as well. They still care about their matchup. They want this champion that either they like, so just want it anyway, or they think that I have to win this matchup. So that's essentially going counter to the philosophy you're giving here, Empyre. So that push and pull is going to be tough for coaches.
Yeah, and I think it's going to depend by team, but I think in most cases, the coach's responsibility should be to create a coherent composition for your team against the enemy's composition. I think that always falls on the coach, and that prep comes in before you get on stage and you get into draft. Like you need to know how these, like when you pick this 1, 2, 3, okay, 4, 5 these are the champions that we need to pick to like synergize with our 1, 2, 3 picks. That shouldn't happen on stage. It shouldn't be like I just don't like that, you end up picking like Kassadin when you have like Kalista Rek'Sai. It doesn't sit right with me. I think that would never happen if you like talk about it in prep, in my opinion.
Sure.
With the other situation where you talk about it, is like the player. So sometimes a player ends up maybe with a wrong, or like you could say like wrong champion from the outside for that player. So an example that you gave is Jizuki on Karma. Yes. For me, so this is my personal opinion, not the opinion of my players or coaches.
Of course.
I think the problem came earlier than when the 5 pick happened, because I think when what
was it supposed to address then?
So I think the problem came earlier in the draft, that we should have changed something. But once we arrived at the 5 pick, we needed to pick Karma, because Karma was the best champion to enhance our draft, and we'd practiced it, and Jizuke he also knew that like it had to be Karma, because if it was another champion, I think that game we would have slowly lost. If we picked any other like LeBlanc counter, we would have slowly lost the game, and we would have been choked out. And so I think we put ourselves in a situation where we had to pick Karma.
I mean, the logic there, if you pick Karma, though, is like Ezreal's going to carry this game, right?
Yeah, and you're going to use your pressure with Graves to take over the map. And then we didn't do that correctly. We won bot lane, but we didn't use our mid-jungle champions correctly to affect the map. And then it looked really bad. And a part of that is, you could say, it was execution. Another part, you could say, we hadn't practiced it enough. Another part, you could say, is it doesn't fit the players we have. And so, for me, I think people shouldn't be like, why did they pick Karma there? The focus should be shifted. Sometimes the focus should be shifted to maybe the draft doesn't fit the team's playstyle, or maybe the draft was wrong versus the composition the enemy was playing. Sometimes when you arrive at that last pick, you end up with a champion.
Nothing left.
Yeah, you have to pick a champion for this draft, or it could have even looked worse.
So
basically, that is an example of what Empyre's been talking about, where even if they didn't like the pick, that was to complete the comp.
Exactly,
so
right.
So better to take the bad pick than throw the comp in the bin, yeah.
Right, so you're saying you sacrifice everything. Like, the most important thing for EG is to make sure that the composition is cohesive, no matter what else it goes against, whether it's the individual tendencies, the practices. If it's the best thing for the comp, that's what you'll go for.
Yeah, because sometimes, not just with EG, but on previous teams, you end up picking a champion that, like I said earlier, you pick it for the lane matchup, but you still end up, it's like the champion can't maximize what it's supposed to do, and then you just get easily choked out of the game.
I'm looking at that draft, and if you have no real choice but Karma, I think the only alternative I could think of right now, but it is just outrageously risky, honestly, just practically running it down, much more than anything, it would be maybe Lissandra, but you're up against Shen, Brom, Kindred, it's not gonna look good.
We could have picked Corki, but okay, we're gonna go scaling versus Kindred, Shen, Aphelios, Brom. Corki isn't gonna do anything. We're just giving them free scaling by going Corki, and we have a Graves, so what are Corki Graves gonna do together? So it's I think that draft was playable. We could have won with that draft, but we could have also taken a different direction.
I've got a question. Since we were talking about that specific game, what do you actually think of TSM's drafting this split? Because obviously it's always a contentious point, but this split particularly, they've had a few that have been, obviously they looked genius when they pulled off the first Fiddle comp, then they tried it again and completely fucked that one up. And then they've had games where, that first one where they put Spicker on Nidalee, some of these have been almost criminal, some of these drafts.
Kind of also similar in Spring, where
Kane rather, it was they put him on. Yes, that was the one I was thinking of.
In Spring, they put him on Maokai. They put Bjergsen on Maokai, and you can get the idea. I don't know. I don't know how TSM gets to these really weird picks that they seem to think internally they're really strong, but they're kind of okay when you get to stage. The Fiddlesticks, in my opinion, isn't really a strong pick, especially if you're blinding it, which they did.
That was the perfect start to the way that the game went for it too, as well. You saw in the next one when that didn't happen, it just did nothing.
Yeah, and I think that was an instance where I was saying they picked Fiddlesticks
against IMT, first of all.
Yeah, it was against IMT.
Bad team as well, exactly. Yes, a dying team, literally.
And the second game they picked Fiddlesticks, and I think they just picked it in isolation. I don't really understand the thought process, because they already didn't have a lot of DPS in the comp. So.
I saw it, actually. I think I know exactly the thought process, because they paired it with Lee, and they wanted to do the exact same invade that they did against Immortals, which is he shoves in the first wave, and then Spica goes invade buff to buff. But when Spica invaded Centaurin was there. And instead of Spica actually playing it safe, he queues over and then immediately gets half chunked from Centaurin, and the early game is over. Everything that the composition was meant to do immediately falls apart. So it's you draft the same thing against the worst team in the league, or one of them, and then you try to even hit the better team with the exact same strategy. What is the disrespect here? Yeah,
FlyQuest would have seen what Spica's path, and he repeats the same path 2 games in a row. And then also, FlyQuest kind of because what does Fiddle want to do? He just wants to push, but then FlyQuest just picks Azir, who's really strong at pushing the wave. So the wave was always equal. So Fiddlesticks didn't have as much prio as he did the game before. So I think they were just a bit cocky and they thought they could snowball the game against a stronger opponent. But FlyQuest was ready with the Azir pick who can stabilize the lane versus Fiddle, and they also kind of predicted Spica's pathing.
I've got to say though,
even then,
yeah,
that composition, even if they got the first dive off, I don't think they would have won.
I gotta say though, I respect you guys for gaslighting the fuck out of TSM. Where, you know, there's that classic story where years and years ago, the Huni Reignover Immortals did the infamous Lucian top pick because apparently I think it was like CLG or someone they were practicing in scrims was like losing against it all the time, and so then they thought this is great and went and did it, and it obviously failed epically. You guys completely baited the fuck out of TSM by losing to like Shen, Brom, fucking Kindred, and making them think like these picks are sick. Let's put those on the whiteboard. Those are going up in priority. It's brilliant bit, because who cares about this best of one? Get him in the playoffs. That's what I'll say.
Yeah, I mean,
thank you for your service, Empyre.
that's best of ones for you.
Exactly.
We'll see what happens in the playoffs.
It's true. It's true though. What do you actually? I've got a contentious question for you, right? Anyone who knows my opinion about Reaper over the last few years is, I'll say it straight up, I actually thought at the end of last year he should be fired. Now, that might sound super harsh, because I don't mean as in he's a bad coach. I just thought for the team that they had, I didn't think he fit very well as a coach, because he would constantly do those weird drafts in playoffs that seemed like LS level shit, where it's like, this is a great draft, but I don't know if it's a great draft for your players. You know, it's that disconnect, right? Now, obviously, this year, everyone's going to throw that in my face and be like, you idiot, look, he's the best coach ever. But it's like, the problem is, his team now looks way better than the one he had last year. Like, now it looks to me like he's sitting in the, like, prime original Coma position where it's like, I'm a genius coach. It's like, mate, every player plays every champion. What are you talking about? Give the other coaches those tools. Let's see what they do with that, you know? So I have a hard time knowing how well he's doing. Like, what do you think of the way that C9 drafts?
Specifically for just like how Reaper drafts and not how he coaches. I don't know much about how he coaches.
Of course, yes.
I heard from like players and people who've worked around Reaper. But in terms of just drafting, I think he basically just he's like he finally found a team that can suit the way he wants to draft. Is basically how I look at it. And
yeah,
last year, he had some good drafts, but then sometimes he would go experimental in those best of 5 series.
I kid you not, I had a dream where I was jungling for C9. I was like, I didn't do anything, but we won anyways. Like, what? The team won around me? Anybody could win with these lanes, but they do make Blabber just be so amazing. He can back it up, but it's like when all your lanes are playing this well, like what are you supposed to do when they also take solo queue way more seriously than I think any other team does?
Here's my problem.
It really shows that if you take solo queue seriously, despite NA being shit at solo queue, you're going to get results.
Here's my problem, basically, is that I have this real hard time figuring out who is the better player out of Nisqy and Blabber, and for this reason, which is, I know what you mean there, like if you have all the winning lanes, etc. But like the crazy thing for me with Blabber is, imagine what a dream it would have to be a mid laner who just worked with you like that and would just go in on anything you said and any dive, even by the way, dives that like if you pause it, mate, pause it and then let me put a little team of people behind the projector of like fucking Froggen, Nuke Doc, Bjergsen, Jensen Goh. You guys going in on this? They're like, fuck no. I'm leaving that jungler to die. He has to learn the hard way. Nisqy's just like, yep, I'm going in. And then they go in and then they turn these incredible fights on. But here's the problem. This is why I have a problem with the Empyre. Is because Nisqy himself did a brilliant job turning his whole marketing around by saying that he idolizes Doinby and that he's trying to copy what Doinby does. Well, here's the problem, right? Is if you go and watch FPX play, listen, mechanically, obviously, Tian is the better of the two players. But I'll tell you what, when they don't play the same way they did last year, the Tian guy looks way worse at times, mate. So that makes me think that, like, bizarrely, maybe Doinby is the more important of those two. So at the same time, it makes me almost go back the other way and go, would Blabber be as good if he didn't have Nisqy? That's what I mean. It's one of those ones where you can't really extract, you know, I'm trying to do like an impossible task here of trying to extract the fucking the white out of the black in one of those, like, that, like, Zen symbol or whatever. What do you think, Empyre? Where are you coming down this, mate?
Blabber, for sure, mechanically and how he plays out fights, and sometimes how he finds, like, good fight selections, is top-notch. But obviously, his playstyle wouldn't work if he had a mid laner that didn't know how to play
if he had Power of Evil or something, yeah.
Yeah, because, like, for example, those mid laners, they want you to come to them. Whereas for when you have someone like Vlaber, he wants you to come to him. But at the same time, I still think he's one of the best junglers we've ever had.
Oh, I'm definitely not saying one's bad. We're just trying to figure out who's doing what in the relationship.
I think a lot of players can. I think mid laners can learn to play like Doinb or Niski, but it's harder to learn how to play the way Blobber does.
Sure.
I got a question for you as well, because I think you can have the same idea. You have got the carry in the jungle, or the carry or the support in the mid, or the carry in the mid and the support in the jungle. I think the jungle is stronger and can give you a lot more results, just because of the role can innately find more advantages for your team earlier on than the mid role. Like, your mid carry is not going to be able to affect the map nearly as quickly and as heavily as the jungle. So if you had to pick one, obviously the player that you have affects that, but if you could just start from scratch, wouldn't you want the jungle to be the guy that is doing it? Because he could just immediately run over the game, and you can have a much wider champion pool from the mid lane. Whereas if you have the carry in the mid and the support in jungle, your support in jungler is really limited to a lot of things that he can play.
Yeah, I think you want your superstar in the jungle, and first, and then what you want for your mid laner is to not lose lane, and to be able to do damage in team fights, and then also help your jungler. If you have those three things, then having the superstar jungler makes the game a lot more easier, because then your mid jungle combo is going to be strong, and you can affect the map just the way C9 does. FPX, G2 when they're on form, they're like proxying side waves at like level 4, which they did, I think, at Worlds versus a team, but I forgot who it was. I think it was Damwon. Oh yeah, when they just obliterated Damwon in a series because they were just diving side lanes at level 3, level 4 with Niski playing Yasuo, and like he was taking Crumbz at like level 4. It's just pretty insane. Like when you have a really good jungler like Jankos, and then you have a mid laner who can do what's required of him and then help the jungler, it's just such a insane combo.
Did you mean to say Caps there? Because you said Niski.
Caps, yeah, Caps.
Yeah, just so people are clear, because they'll get confused otherwise. Right? Yeah, fair enough. Go on. Where do we go now, Crumbz?
I think that was the Halo Blades Yasuo from Caps. I remember that.
Yeah,
I mean, I want to know, like,
if you want to see like what they did there, because we scrimmed them once, they did that to us, and we didn't know it was possible to kind of.
Is it like impossible to counter if you don't know what's coming?
Yeah, and because like if you pick a scaling comp and then G2, like if G2, because like Damwon was playing a lot of scaling comps, so they knew Damwon was going to play scaling, and then they know they can do that, and they're really good at doing that, and they were proxying waves at such an early level. Oh my god, you just can't play the rest of the game. It was a fantastic series to watch on how to like punish a scaling comp.
Well, I wanted to go into how do we get to the point where you can have these champion pools, where you can have these more creative rosters. Like, what is the need for the practice for the players and the confidence that you need for? Do we play something that we don't have a lot of practice on, but we know is good for the comp? Because you mentioned that you're willing to sacrifice, say, a specific player style if it makes sense for the comp. How far do you take that? And how much practice do you really need to put in if it really makes a lot of sense, right? If you can think we have access to every single champion, and we prioritize the comp as the most important thing, wouldn't then we be able to just draft whatever we feel rounds this out in the strongest way possible?
So if we're talking about LCS specifically, I think we basically need more players that are like the C9 players, and that are similar to players who have like an insane drive and are able to have like a strong skill ceiling, that they're able to play a lot of different champions. We also saw like the evolution of that in LEC, where Mad Lions came in, and most of the players, I would say most of the players can play a lot of different champions, and their skill ceiling is so high. I think basically and that's also happening also in Korea and LPL as well, is like they just have a lot of these talents and their skill ceiling is so high, they can play so many different champions. I think hopefully as the NA amateur scene gets better and we get like stronger development, youth development in NA, we will hopefully see that emulate.
You mentioned drive there as a very important thing, because I think it might be Cloud9 that has the highest drive. Like, it's very clear from their players because they haven't really done that much as this unit. It's a relatively new team, but do they need to just win worlds? Do they need to win something for motivating the rest? So the example that I remember, it's not League, but I believe it was a Korean golfer, a female golfer, that just like you never really heard of it, but then she suddenly wins a tournament in the States, and then now the golf practice in Korea just surges dramatically because people now believe like, oh my God, it's actually possible. We could do it. It's the same thing that happened with G2, right? They win MSI, they get second in the world. It's like, oh shit, it's possible for us. Is it that NA just doesn't think it's possible? Is that really what's going on?
I think it's definitely a factor. I think if C9, they don't need to win it. If they just show really good showings versus the other strong regions, then NA players and the NA players in solo queue, the amateur players are going to be a lot more motivated, a lot more confident than these guys, like 3 of them are NA players, relatively new players to the scene. If they can do it, like we can do it as well, and we saw that happen in Europe. In 2017, Misfits, Fnatic, and Vitality all played really well. Maybe not Fnatic, I think that was the year after. Right? I can't remember what...
Fnatic and Vitality was the year after.
Yeah, okay. So 2017 was like Misfits, and then the year after, Vitality and Fnatic. That just gave a lot of hope to the EU player base, and we also saw less importing happen in EU, and I think that change is happening right now with like how the C9 team was assembled. And the recent controversies around the bottom tier teams importing like mediocre imports.
Yes.
And I think we are also seeing more talent crop up in the amateur scenes now.
I've got an NA related question then. So one of the problems NA has, it's impossible to get away from, is I don't really, in fact, no one's ever explained it to me, really what is the point of academy? Like by its name, it should be where you train the next talents that come into your team. But if you notice, practically no one does that. Like for example, even Tactical getting into LCS was just because Doublelift fucked up the split. That was it. He would have never gotten a starting spot. So the problem I have is this. At the moment, it doesn't make sense to treat Academy like it's mini LCS and be like, we've got to win the best of one now and win the playoffs. Because if you win, like 100 Thieves, no one gives a fuck. It doesn't matter. So should, for example, Academy be used as like should this be where we're making these players play a billion different things and different comps and getting them? What is there a way we can flex Academy to be something useful? What do you think?
I've got one, but I want to hear Empyre's.
All right.
I think like the problem with Academy right now is you're incentivized to, if you have the funds or the player pool, to make the strongest Academy team, so that you can have like a bench that motivates your main team.
Yes.
Or like if like something happens to one of your main players, you can sub them in.
It's like having a backup quarterback in the NFL or something. Yes.
Yeah. So you're incentivized to do that. They also removed a lot of the restrictions around having veterans in your team. I think the first split, or maybe the first year, I think it was just the first split though. The rule was I think you can only have 2 veterans on a team, and then I think they just removed that completely as the splits went on, because I don't know the exact reasoning, but I didn't because like I guess the reasoning was, where do these players go then after that? They like it's kind of cruel for them to just put them back into amateur where they get a lot less money because they're good at, like they're better than a lot of players like playing, so it's kind of like
meritocratic basis. Yeah, sure.
So I mean, to make Academy better, I think it's not really. I mean, I don't know. I think there just needs to be less incentives to have these like veterans in Academy, or either that, or just we need to have a similar system to the ERLs in Europe, where we have the amateur system. I think the amateur system this year is growing. Right now, the amateur teams play multiple times a week. There are a lot of different amateur tournaments that lead into scouting grounds for NA, and these players are getting a lot of kind of like high, I guess, somewhat pressure situations in real matches, and I think that's going to help their development. So I think amateur scene is going the right way, and there's also like more prize pool money now in the amateur scene. So I think as long as we keep developing those amateur scenes, we're going to see a lot more players trying out the amateur scene and playing in competitive matches, getting a lot of experience there at a young age. Like you're seeing a lot of 16, 17-year-olds playing in these amateur scenes now.
Like to back up what you were saying on in terms of like just using it as a bench. Like, listen, there's a lot of teams had players they were testing, but like that's where like in the spring split, I thought that Dig amateur academy team was so cynically put together. It was pathetic. It was the one where the entire team were like LCS veterans, and you were literally just putting it like, you know what, I'm obviously just going to move someone up as soon as like a position goes to shut on the main team. Like that's not even meant to develop anyone because there's no one to develop. There was literally not a single. I think the only development was like Phoenix went AD carry. That was it. Like the rest were just all established players, you know.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the thought process was there. Probably what you said. I think because like some players they've been playing in LCS for ages, so maybe. Why do they need to be there other than being able to teach younger players or like kind of have a stable position? And then like if you have like 2 vets and the rest is are young players and the older players can like transfer some of their teachings.
The Immortals Academy is a good example.
Well,
of that. Yeah, they've got the vets. Yeah, and then you've got the couple of younger players who in theory they have a chance to play with a real team though.
Yeah. And then there are some players who maybe had a couple of splits in a bottom team in LCS. And then I think that's fine for them to go back into academy because they're still good enough, but maybe they didn't find the right LCS team.
Okay.
So for example, like we have Anda who plays. He's like one of the best junglers in academy, and he's super aggressive. He's mechanically talented, but he played on bottom LCS teams in 100 Thieves with like Ryu, or it was also Huhi mid, and then he also played on like a bad FlyQuest team. So I sometimes these players didn't have like the right shot or maybe the right coaching staff to help them develop. So I think those players sometimes I think deserve another chance in LCS. Similar to like also Acadian, although Acadian isn't looking too hot.
Yeah,
right
sure.
now.
Right, come on then, Crumbz. What was your approach?
I mean, I think that the amateur scene, the problem is there's not enough prize pool and there's not enough tournaments for you to actually justify going full time to try to go into that because you can't pay you literally cannot sustain yourself off of that. So if you can't pay your bills and your food, then why would you even bother for that? But the way that I wanted to use amateur was kind of a mixture of what 100 Thieves has, where you have a third team below academy, and then you just have the academy team with the incentive it to be this team is meant to be our internal scrim partner composed of players that will really motivate the main team, where you can practice a lot of the scenarios and new compositions that we may not want to show against anybody else. And then that academy team will do the same thing with the team below it, so that they will then be grooming and practicing in turn with the bottom team below it that will essentially funnel players into this little line of teams back and forth. And you not only get to have practice on command, but you also grow your talent. And if you set it from the start that, hey, performance will get you moved up in this ladder, I think that you actually can get really positive results over time, and not only establishing a good way for coaching, for staff, for people to just get acclimated to what your roster is trying to do, but for players to really feel the differences between, okay, this is what the best are, this is what like the medium best are, and this is what the brand new rookies are starting. Because I guarantee you there's some 13-year-old challenger players that could really show something new to some guys at the LCS level.
Yeah, I think for sure if we like show proof that you can play in these amateur leagues and you can get an academy spot, you know, a split or two after, it's gonna motivate a lot of solo queue players to like, oh man, this is a viable option, and we can get to academy in like a split or two if we put our time into playing an amateur for a year or so, and that happened to, for example, Evolved. He played an amateur with Radiant, who is High's team. He played there for almost a year, and then he got picked up on TSM, and now he's doing really well. So I think if we basically support the amateur scene, and that's either through Riot and or the LCS teams like 100 Thieves are doing, if we do that and we show that from there you can get to academy, and then you can get to LCS, and that's where Poom is right now. He went from amateur to academy to LCS in the span of like 6 months. If we show that progression, and then we also show with C9 with our top teams that we can challenge other regions, the best regions, then it's just going to motivate more people. I think that's one way we can help develop.
I think another motivating factor, though, and where do you stand on this? Because when I look at Academy, I'm thinking TSM, 100 Thieves Academy, although I don't know how they'll look with the new chain of changes. Maybe EG and Cloud9 Academy. These teams could easily be top 6 LCS.
Easily might be pushing it a bit, but yeah.
What?
Maybe,
Okay, hang on. All right. Here's
maybe
the bottom LCS that you got right now. Dig, Thieves, Immortals, and Golden Guardians. Cloud9 Academy would bop those teams, first of all.
Yeah.
TSM Academy, I think, would also do really well there.
I think they would challenge them. Yeah.
Again, someone like CLG or TSM or Team Liquid that usually has some running down drafts. I don't think it's that far-fetched. Like, they could legitimately contend with these teams. Like, they're not making this. They have a lot more room to experiment. They're underestimated all the time.
Less pressure as well.
Yeah.
Like if like the LCS team is going to be pressured to beat that academy team.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Like next week, like imagine what's happening next week. You have the Immortals main that got just demoted, playing against the bottom team academy team, Team Liquid. Now, what happens if the Immortals bottom last place LCS team loses against academy last place LCS team? Right, that already makes a huge case for like, wait a minute, like there is something like these leagues might not be that different.
Yeah, I mean, how some of the bottom teams handled off season is no secret that they botched it really, really hard in the off season, and they could have assembled better teams or teams with better synergy. Or maybe they also just didn't want to pay buyouts because teams put buyouts on their academy players. So maybe they didn't want to pay those, and they were like a bit more, like confident that they could get similar value out of the other veteran players or young talent from other regions. So yeah, in the end, I do agree with you. I think the bottom teams have been managed well, but I also don't want to celebrate mediocrity either. Like, for example, after one best of one between IMT and who did they beat? It was Golden Guardians. We're like saying, yeah, like this is the proof that you should just promote any NA talent.
No, don't agree with that one.
Let's give this team some time. Like, we don't know how good Alorum and Insanity are yet.
Sure.
They're obviously like Insanity's probably, and like there's also like a comparison point, you know? Like, why did IMT have Ica to begin with? What if they had Pobolter to begin with, and then you make the comparison? Okay, Pobolter is probably better than Insanity. So like, if they imported the better mid, they would, or like they signed a better mid.
It wouldn't have been the correct move to put him up. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, like the argument wouldn't exist that.
Yes.
Why aren't they starting Insanity?
Put it this way, it's not like there aren't imports who are better than Insanity, essentially. Like, that's the stupidest part of the argument. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like if they imported Milica or like Zazie.
Yeah, exactly.
They would be getting a lot less flame because they imported.
Which is also the appropriate conversation, because they did import a National League player from Europe. They just imported like the wrong one. Like, if you made a list of 10, they were like 10th or below 10 on the list, and they thought, yeah, this is the guy to all in on. So that's really not a discussion about NA talent, is it? I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. That's kind of a distraction.
Yeah, but I do think there are legitimate NA talent in academy and in amateur, but sometimes they're stuck on under buyouts from other teams, so you can't get them. Especially the bottom teams. As far as I know, all the bottom teams don't have good academy teams right now. Golden Guardians, IMT, Dig, they're not faring too well in academy. So if they are going to promote if they are going to promote, like, get the better talent in academy, like for example Fudge, I mean, Jack is going to put a huge ass price on Fudge. Like, there's no doubt.
Yeah, but if you're willing to give Huni 2.3, like, Are you
Yeah.
really like not gonna think about Fudge in that way? Like what is going on? Like what is the value you're getting? You need to win to even get interviews if what you're saying is you want personality. Like,
Sure, that's true.
Yeah, exactly.
This video was kindly supported by Alexander Rao, Bobby, Dean Tanglis, Istar, JDubs, Jensen Goh, the Puyallup Tribe, Soliko, Spencer Green, Tobias Bernasconi, Xinged, and a special thanks, as always, goes out to my main man, Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Maybe you want to ask me a question in those AMAs I do each month. Do you want teasers for who's going to appear next on my content? Maybe you want to take part in one of those lengthy discussions about esports with me. Well, if so, then put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today at the Patreon link in the description box below.